Yeah, great Wednesday. So, show of hands, how many of you are doing the half marathon? Okay, and okay, go ahead and put your hands down. Now, show of hands, how many of you are doing half marathon for your first time? All right, cool. So we got some first timers. All right, marathoners. Okay, first time marathoners. So we got 3, 2. Okay. All right. Well, this is exciting because nutrition is such an extraordinary part of your training and your race day experience. And I say experience because that's what it can be, okay? I'm going to tell you about my first marathon, which wasn't really that great of an experience for me. I was over in Iraq, okay, doing my first 26.2 miles. And I had 2 packets of goo on me, all right? I wasn't carrying any water. They had some oranges out on the race, but I didn't really know what I should have, okay? Nobody had told me. I wasn't very experienced back then. And so I got to about mile 3, and one of my goo packets actually fell out, all right? Mile 3, and one of my goo packets fell out, and I was like, okay, I think I'll still be all right. Well, I ended up taking my first goo around mile 9. I didn't have any Gatorade on the course. I had a couple of oranges, and I tried to throw down as much water as I could. I'll tell you what, I felt like I hit the wall around mile 11. It was really hot out that day. I wasn't replenishing my body with enough fluids, but not only the fluids, I wasn't giving my body enough energy as well. All right, so carbohydrates, we'll talk a little bit about energy. All right, so I finished my first marathon feeling like I wanted to die, literally. And I was like, this is the worst idea I've ever had in my life. I never want to do this again, okay? And here I am quite a while later. You know, I really enjoy running. And that's because I found out how to nail my nutrition. And nutrition is key, all right? So when we talk about endurance activity, I like to think of it as having 3 different pillars, all right? So the first one is training, the second one is your mindset, and then the third one is nutrition. And they're not mutually exclusive, right? So they don't just rest alone by themselves. What you do in one area affects the other, all right? So if you like are gunning it right out the bat and it's really hot out and you're sweating a lot, you might have to take in a little bit more liquids. If your mindset isn't right and you're not thinking about when you need to take in nutrition, your carbohydrates, you might forget, okay? Everything is interconnected. If you're not taking your nutrition down, it's really hard to have that strong mindset because you might feel dog-tired and you might start to suffer a little bit physically, especially if you're doing the longer distance like a marathon, okay? Everything is interconnected, so I want you to think about that from here on out. Everything's interconnected with my training, you know, how I prepare myself physically, how I prepare myself mentally, and how I prepare myself from a nutritional standpoint as well. And so if you've been part of my programs in the past, I've always challenged my participants to come up with their injury prevention plan, okay? And maybe you remember that from the past, from Winter Warriors, but I want to challenge you right off the bat to come up with your injury prevention plan. What things are you going to do to help keep your body healthy? Because what we want to do is we want to decrease the risk for injuries, all right? Nutrition is a way to do that, to help decrease your risk for developing pains or even injuries. And why do we want to do that? Why do you think? What's that?
Keep running.
Because you want to keep running, right? I mean, I've been injured before. It sucks, right? Because it keeps you from doing what you want to do, all right? So many health benefits, so many psychological benefits, emotional benefits from running, all right? Great thing. So you want to keep doing it, okay? So coming up with your injury prevention plan, what steps are you going to take to make sure that you don't get injured? How are you going to adhere to those steps? And where does nutrition fall? Where does nutrition fall in your injury prevention plan? All right, so I just want to start off with some of what they're called macronutrients, all right? Your carbs, fats, and your proteins, okay? So carbohydrates. Somebody tell me some forms of carbohydrates that you can have for endurance activities. Carbohydrates.
Pasta? Like to fuel on the run? Or
To fuel on the run. Yep, to fuel on the run. Goo, all right. A gel.
Sport beans.
The sport beans, yep.
Honey.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's a lot of different forms of carbohydrate. You're talking about the sugars, all right? Usually the sugars are what you have during the race, during the event. And you said pasta. Pasta is a starch, okay? Still a carbohydrate, but it's a different source, okay? And you wouldn't necessarily take a starch during a race, but it would be good to have throughout the week, okay? So the carbohydrates, the way it works, our muscles are storing what's called our glycogen, okay? That's a different name for carbohydrates, essentially. So it's stored in your muscles. And this is the primary source of energy when you do endurance activity, okay? So do you think that throughout your training and during your long runs, you should be refueling your carbohydrates? Yes, north-south, yes, absolutely. You should be refueling those because you're taking away those stores. Maybe you've heard of people hitting the wall before. Have you ever heard of somebody hitting the wall before? That's usually a depletion of those stores, all right? So your muscle glycogen stores a certain amount of energy, and one of the biggest things that you'll hear me say is, like if you have a question, well, the answer really depends. It's one way for one person, it's a different way for somebody else, okay? So that's one thing that you really need to think about is what works best for you, all right? So coming up with your injury prevention plan, finding out where nutrition fits along those lines, and then thinking about and practicing how nutrition works for you on your runs and during your training, okay? So when it comes to performance, the recommendation for carbohydrates during an endurance event is 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour of endurance activity, okay? So what does that mean, all right? 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour of endurance activity. I've got a couple samples right here, okay? So with this goo packet, there is 22 total grams of carbohydrates in one of these, okay? So if I was to take one of these per hour, would I meet the 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates in that hour? No. No, I wouldn't. I'd have to take more, okay? And so the 30 to 60 is really a range because, again, it falls onto you as an individual because some people, like elite athletes, can take up to 60 grams of carbohydrate. Some people can only do 30 grams. It's all about what your stomach can handle, okay? But you want to be careful, too, because the type of carbohydrate that you're putting in your body matters, okay? So a goo versus a chomp is going to be very different because a chomp takes more time to digest, okay? So the goal when experimenting with nutrition is to make sure that you're taking in carbohydrates that aren't going to upset your stomach. So you want to practice with them, but you also want to make sure that you don't take too much too quickly. So with the chomps, let me just find the nutrition. So there's four pieces as a serving size for the chomps, all right? That's 23 grams of carbohydrates. There's 2 servings in this chomps, okay? So 2 servings at 23 grams of carbs per serving. If I was to take one of these over the course of the hour, would I suffice that 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates in the hour? Yes, I would, all right? Because I'd be around 46, okay? So do you see how it works? Now, if I was to take these all at once, do you think I have a greater likelihood of upsetting my stomach? Yes, absolutely, okay? And so once that GI, your stomach starts to get upset, it can really be problematic and throw off the rest of your racing experience, okay? Especially when you're on your long runs. So these are 2 forms of carbohydrate. There's not as much risk associated with this. There is a risk associated with this. I would suggest if you are taking the chomps, walk and eat these, okay? I have a friend who was trying to run and eat these, actually started choking. He had to get help from somebody else to dislodge it from the back of his mouth, all right? So really practice safety when eating these out on the course. So these are 2 forms of carbohydrates that you can have during your run, okay? Does anybody know another one? Not in the form of like a solid.
I use this Hammer Perpetuum, I guess, that has carbohydrates in it.
Yeah, all right. So Gatorade, all right, a sports drink, carbohydrates. You can look on the nutrition label, see how many grams of carbohydrates the the sports drink has, and then equate it to what your needs are each hour. Does that make sense? Okay, so where the chomps are going to take a little bit longer to digest, all right, this is not going to take as long as the chomps. The goo is going to absorb into your system a little bit faster. That means that the carbohydrates are going to be available that much quicker, all right? So what do you think about for the sports drink? If I had a sports drink,
Quick.
it's going to be quick, all right? So the recommendation, and this is again something that you'll have to try out, but this is what works for me and people that I've paced or coached or mentored before. Well, especially for the longer runs, your 13s all the way up to your 26 and beyond, you really want to focus on the sports drink right away. Get that for the first half of the race, and then switch over to the goos with water. Okay. And so you're not taking these two, the goos or the chomps, with Gatorade. And why do you think that is?
Overload.
Carbohydrate overload. Again, because you think about the bottom of your stomach. All right, you got a lot trying to like get it down in through the bottom of your stomach to be absorbed and through some of your intestines. Okay, and so if you've got solid food plugging it up, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to be almost like a backfill. All right, so you really want to really start out with that liquid, that fluid carbohydrate right off the bat. And again, you want to play with this because it's not the same for everybody, but in most cases that's what works best.
How long does it take to absorb that stuff?
Well, it's different for everybody.
Metabolism, a factor.
It's different for everybody, and it depends. It really depends on what you have on there, what you have in your stomach. But the absorption rate is fairly quick with the sports drinks, especially. So probably within that first 20 to 30 minutes, it'll be processing, and that goes through a process through your liver to convert it into an energy that's usable. But that's why you use it, is because you want to try to conserve that muscle glycogen, that energy that's stored in your muscles. You want to try to conserve it for as long as you can. Now sometimes you can't. Sometimes you throw down. You use the information. You're doing 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. You're doing it, and let's say for you marathoners, you hit mile 20 and you bonk. You still might have that happen. All right, so again, that's why I always like to throw that in there. Mindset, that's where the mindset comes in, okay? Because you're going to be challenged mentally. So when you just try to keep a solid nutritional foundation and maintain a strong mindset, and make sure that you're physically training your body too, what you're going to do here in a little bit. You guys have Magic Mile tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, magical, all right.
I'm a little late to the party, but when you're taking like a goo, I don't know, for me, I found it, would you suggest taking a little bit of time, kind of slowly taking it down, or versus like squeezing the whole thing in your mouth?
That's a great. So what I said earlier is my answer to tonight is going to be it depends a lot. It's because it might work for you, but for somebody else, they might just be like for me, I just squeeze it down all the way, like right off the bat, and I'm good. That works for me. Somebody else, they might not like how much sugar they're getting all at once, so they might milk it for a little while.
I just feel like you get your body, like I have really high metabolism, so I feel like when I do a little bit,
Yeah.
it gives me a little bit of energy, and then a little bit later I take more and it gives me a little bit more energy, versus when I take it all at once, my body just goes, and it's just like, it's like throwing a thing of gasoline on fire. Just
Yeah. It might not matter, but if it affects like if you're like, oh my gosh, this works, and mentally it's getting you going, do it, because that's a big part of it, mentally. I mean, y'all are going to be challenged, whether you're doing 13 miles, whether you're doing 26 miles. Those are long distances, all right? So,
Aaron, would you suggest being near a water stop when you take the goo?
Yeah, be near a water stop. Otherwise, for your training runs, I always like to recommend having, even in the winter time, I always say have water with you, okay? This is my favorite one, it's the Amphipod. I've tried a lot, probably about 50 of these things, and this is my favorite because I can sit here and run like this, and it doesn't even bother me. I don't even notice it. Some of the other ones you kind of have to grip a little bit more, but this one fits my hand really nice, so I like it. So if you don't have a bottle that you can run with, I'd suggest finding one because they're great. And I mean, you should, especially in the summertime when it's hot, you want to have something like this on you at all times.
Aaron, on the 30 to 60 gram rule, does intensity play a role in that, or is it still pretty much 30 to 60 whether it's a slow run or marathon pace?
No, because your body is still going to be using that energy. Yeah. Now, if you were walking, it'd be a little bit different because your body, I mean, think about the walking form. You're not requiring as much energy from your body. But as soon as you start swinging those arms a bit more and you start pounding that pavement with your feet, your body is using more energy because it has to keep up with the demand and the stresses that you're putting it through.
And so what you do in a training run that's at a slower pace, you probably
Yeah.
the same thing you do in a
Still
race.
still do it. And that's the perfect time to practice your nutrition, okay? So we talked a little bit about the race day carbohydrates, but I also want to talk about carbohydrates throughout the week too, because race day nutrition is important. Training nutrition is probably even more important, okay? My rule of thumb, and you've probably heard me say this before if you've been in one of my other training programs, is when you're doing long distances such as these, this is not the time to go on a weight loss program, okay? I met with somebody who was training for an ultra endurance event a few months ago, and this guy said that he was just feeling so lethargic and tired all the time training for this 50K, 30 miles, okay? And I'm like, well, what are you eating? And he told me, and I added it up, he was at about 1,200 calories total for the day. All right? And I'm telling you, it matters what you're putting inside your body because it's going to help propel you to keep doing what you're wanting to do, especially part of that plan, that injury prevention plan that I was telling you about, okay? So making nutrition a part of your everyday routine, okay? So personally, on my injury prevention plan, I've got eat 5 servings of fruits and veggies every day, okay? And I know I'm getting away from the carbohydrates, but stay with me. I try to eat salmon once or twice a week, or something with the omega-3 fatty acids, okay? And I try to eat the carbohydrates that are recommended. So for guys, on your daily recommendation, you should be between 8 to 10 grams per kilogram of body weight. And you're like, kilograms? This is America. I'm like, yeah, all right. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your body weight, divide it by 2.2. Then for guys, multiply it by 8, and then multiply it by 10, and that's gonna give you the range. For women, you wanna do that same thing, multiply it by 6, and then multiply it by 8. That's gonna give you the range for women, okay? So there's lots of different starches and different types of carbohydrate that you can have throughout the week. You said pasta, that's a starch. How many of you knew fruits, carbohydrates, all right? You can get your carbohydrates in that way too, okay? All right.
Is there any bad carbohydrates?
Well,
Beer?
yeah, beer. He says beer. Yeah, in large quantities. Yeah, I mean, I would stay away from the alcohol is probably not the best, just because alcohol can be a diuretic and can. Yeah, exactly.
The liver, when it's metabolizing alcohol, it takes a little more energy, and and you aren't able to store as much glycogen at the time also.
Yeah.
So
it's. Yeah, if you are gonna have some drinks, I mean, if you're a social drinker, you'd be fine. But just watch out for the heavy days. All right.
What is?
What you mean Tuesday?
A quick question. I mean, when you're running, is it symptomatic that when you're low on carbs? I mean, is that when your muscles start getting tired and fatigue, or is it symptoms?
You might feel. Have you ever felt like? What's the farthest distance you've run before?
Marathon.
Okay, so where you get like that 20, maybe sometimes it depends, anywhere from like 15 to 22, you might start to feel a little bonky, especially if your nutrition's not on point. That's probably part of the symptoms. And you bring up a great point because different people store muscle glycogen at different levels, okay? Some people can only make it like 9 miles before their muscle glycogen stores would be depleted without taking any carbohydrate in throughout their run. Some people can make it up to like 17 or 20 miles, okay? It really depends on the person. That's a great question. Another point on the carbohydrate, and then we'll move on to fats, but before race days, this is something that I do based off of what the research shows is that when you sleep, you tend to lose a little bit of muscle glycogen, all right? So before race days, and maybe this isn't as important for the half marathoners, because the 13 miles isn't as demanding as the 26. The 26 miles, I'll wake up a couple hours before my race, and I'll chug some Gatorade, and that's to try to replenish the muscle glycogen stores before the race starts.
What about carb loading?
That's another great question. So maybe you've heard of carb loading before. The research shows that carb loading actually has adverse effects. Okay, it can make you feel groggy. Okay, and again, that mental stimulation, that mental toughness is something that you're going to want for race day. Carb loading can adversely affect that, both physically and mentally. So yeah, that.
Just a quick follow-up. How quick does it normally replenish? I mean, if you kind of hit that plateau or whatever, I mean, that's not something you can make up with a race.
Something, yeah, it's going to be tough, especially because it's so demanding. I mean, you're putting your body through a lot of stress. Your body's demanding a lot of energy, so it's going to be tough to make up if you're not replenishing it up right off the bat. It's almost like a preventative measure. All right, so if you want, I'll be here at some of the other training runs, but if you have more specific questions, like what you want to do personally, let me know and we can talk about that. But having a plan in place is, and we haven't talked about a plan, but having a race day plan, which your mentors, your pacers should have. Like when I was a pacer, I paced a guy, and I can still remember it. It was like every water stop for the first 10 miles was Gatorade. All right, I was getting that 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate through the Gatorade.
No glue at all. Nothing else. Just Gatorade.
Not for the first. This is for me. Remember, it's based off of what works for you. All right. So we had practiced this. So the first 10 miles we did nothing but Gatorade. All right. Miles 11, 15, 17, we're alternating throwing down packets of goo with the water. Okay. Once we got to 20 to 21, I almost call it like the free-for-all, because then it's just like you just got to find a way to get carbohydrates in, because you're usually going to feel pretty fatigued. So just find a way to get carbohydrates in, push on for those last 6 miles, because it's tough. So, but yeah, no carb loading. Good question.
What do you mean by carb loading?
So maybe you've heard in the past, get as much. We'll go back to pasta, because it seems like that's what most people relate to. Say before like a big run or a big race day, you just throw down a lot of pasta. Okay. You can have pasta the night before. Just don't overdo it. It's not a load. Some people, I've heard of some people doing it 3 weeks out before their big race. They'll eat heavy carbs every day. You don't want to do that. You could even gain some weight, but it'll leave you feeling really groggy, sluggish. You won't perform as well, and it'll make for a horrible experience. And I'm saying experience because it can be, okay? Y'all are doing the right things. I didn't do this for my first marathon. Y'all are doing the right things, okay? Learning about what you need to do. You're going to practice what you're going to do nutrition-wise for race day. Y'all will be set. You've got mentors. I didn't have any of that stuff, right? So you'll be great. It'll be an experience. All right. Any other questions right now? Okay. So fats, I won't take up too much time on this. They're really healthy to have in your diet. Okay, 25 to 30% of your total intake should be some sort of fat. Does anybody know the fats that you want to stay away from?
Saturated.
Saturated when you can. You can have it in limited amounts. I know that there's some in like red meats. Limit your red meats, but you can have some every now and then. But the trans fat, okay? Now that's more of a health standard. The recommendation for trans fat is 0 grams. So no trans fat. Limit the saturated fats, but then get your poly and your monos, okay? Does anybody know what foods have the poly and the monounsaturated fats?
Fatty fish.
Yeah, fatty fat. Yeah, avocados, fatty fish. All right. So our bodies are always trying to get to a state of equilibrium. Okay. And based off of the foods that we eat, the stresses that we're putting through our bodies, there's lots of different things happening inside. Okay. Now, what's great about you heard me talk about salmon earlier, the omega-3 fatty acids. The omega-3 fatty acids are going to be they're going to help offset all of the stresses that you're putting on your body. Okay, so there's a lot of like stress going on inside. Your body's trying to get back to that equilibrium. Those omega-3 fatty acids are really going to help with that. And you might be like, oh, Aaron, can I just take those in the form of a pill? I'd say no. Try to get it from the foods that you eat. All right, try to stay away from the dietary supplements and try to get your nutrition from the foods that you eat. And that goes without saying, unless your doctor has prescribed you to those. Okay. Omega-3 fatty acids are really great for runners. With protein, you might be surprised that actually most Americans get the required protein that they need in a day. Okay, we've got, maybe you've heard of it before, get your protein, I gotta get my protein. A lot of people get their protein, all right? A lot of people get their protein. What's the recommendation for athletes such as yourselves that are training? 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So again, take your kilograms, this is America, right? Again, that equation is take your body weight in pounds divided by 2.2. That'll be your kilograms, and then use that to multiply the 1 to 1.2. That'll give you the range, okay? Any questions about protein? Oh, and protein is great. Why? Why do you think protein's great? Recovery helps with that rebuild. Yep, those amino acids. Diversify your foods, diversify your foods, diversify your foods, all right? The more amino acids that you get that are in the foods that you eat, they're all stored in this pool. They compete for helping your body recover, all right? Diversify your foods, okay? Keep switching them up. All right, with the micronutrients, I want to talk about electrolytes, okay? Maybe you've heard about electrolytes. They really help carry out a lot of the electrical functions in our body, with signaling, with trying to get your muscles to fire, you know, with your sodium, your calcium, your potassium, things like that. Maybe you've heard about sodium being lost through sweat. Yeah? North, south, east, west? No? Okay. So with sodium, you lose a lot through sweat. But again, it depends on the person. Some people are heavy sweaters, heavy salters. Okay? Some people aren't. So you really want to pay attention to that. Have that good self-awareness. You were talking about, is there some symptoms that you might feel? Well, with the electrolytes, yeah, you might start to feel a little lightheaded. You might start to feel like it's really hard to move your legs, you know, where you're starting to feel really heavy. It's amazing what can happen when you replenish those through electrolytes. Now, does anybody know what type of electrolytes you can use? I think you've had some. Car batteries, where you stick your tongue to it. There you go.
Is there like S-tabs or S-tabs?
There's different ones that you can use. Yeah. So I wish I had some samples.
Don't they have this in the sports drinks?
There is some sodium in the sports drinks, but again, it really depends on who you are as a person. If you're a heavy sweater, heavy salter, you can try throwing down some Noon. It may or may not be enough. You really have to pay attention to it. I'm a heavy sweater, heavy salter. And when I do like my long runs or, you know, anything over like 4 or 5 hours, I'll throw down sodium tabs because I'm losing a lot of sodium, okay? That's for me. That's what works best for me. I would suggest not going to sodium tabs right away. But look at your nutrition label, the foods that you're putting into your body when you're running, you know, with the Gatorade. Look at the sodium content. With the Noon, look at what's in the Noon, all right? When you're talking S-caps going to have a lot more sodium, a lot more electrolytes than the Noon. So think about pay attention to what your body is doing and going through, and you can experiment with stuff, all right? That's the great thing about training, is that it's experiment, because once you hone in and find what works for you and things start clicking, I'm telling you what, it's amazing. It's an amazing experience each time you go out for a run, each time you do an event, okay? Big case in point, Noon is not carbohydrate. If you're doing a marathon, maybe even a half marathon, if you try drinking Noon the entire time thinking that it's going to be able to give you the energy, because it's not energy, all right? It's not energy, it's electrolytes. You're probably going to bonk, all right? You're probably going to bonk, okay? Does everybody know what I mean when I say bonk? You're going to feel like you hit the wall, yeah? You know what I mean when I say that? Like you're feeling really sluggish, energy drained, things like that? Okay. And then for vitamins and minerals, they really help carry out a lot of the essential functions physiologically, all right? So making sure, like I said, as part of my injury prevention plan, I eat 5 servings of fruits and veggies every day because I want to make sure that my body has all those vitamins and minerals to help sustain the stress that I'm putting it through, okay? That's why fats matter, because when you intake the fat, it helps with hormones, some of the hormone balances throughout your body, but it also helps with vitamin uptake, all right? Vitamin uptake, so that's why fats are important. So getting those vitamins and minerals, diversifying your diet can be really healthy. And then we'll finish with fluids. So the fluids is really easy, all right? Make sure that you're drinking fluids each and every day, all right? Don't wait until the day of to start hydrating, all right? This should be an ongoing journey, all right? It's not this linear process where you do X and Y and you get Z, all right? It's more like a spider web. It's very complex, but it's all interrelated, all right? Everything that you do matters, okay? So with the fluid, you want to try to get down. You want to try to get down roughly one bottle like this an hour, all right? So anywhere from 10 to 16 ounces an hour. Make sure to do that. And then thinking about carbohydrates, you know, what's a good way to get carbohydrates and hydrate your body at the same time? Sports drinks, Gatorade, things like that, okay? So again, there's a lot of information out there. Think about and practice with what works for you. And I just want to make this last point with fluids. When you start doing endurance activities, your thirst mechanisms, they don't work as well, okay? So you've probably heard, if you start to feel thirsty during your run, your long run, or your endurance event, you're probably lingering towards being dehydrated. And that's true because your thirst mechanism doesn't work as well. So right off the bat, and even the days leading up to it, you should be throwing down fluids, all right? Make sure that you're throwing down fluids. The recommendation for fluid intake throughout the day is 8 to 12 glasses, 12 to 16 ounces of water a day, 8 to 12 of those a day, okay? All right. Any questions?
How about during the race for fluids?
For fluids?
Yeah.
I would say, this is my rule of thumb, try to throw down one of these an hour. So, however, was that a lot for you?
Yeah.
Well, again, it depends.
Each person's different.
It depends.
That's
different
too much for me. That's too much for me.
It's different for each person. See, and like I said before, I'm a heavy sweater, I'm a heavy salter, all right? I throw down about one of these an hour, okay? Some people will throw down something like this. But to say that you can't do liquids, especially at the beginning of the race, I would challenge you to try to find a way. Practice with it. It's not like you just go out on race day and you're just like, I'm gonna try this. You know, you practice leading up to it, okay?
Does it depend on the weather too?
That's another great question. The weather does depend. The hotter it is out, the humidity, the dew point, all those things matter because your body is gonna have to be working harder because it's trying to get back to that state of equilibrium. All right. Your core body temperature goes up, it's going to try to cool it back down. That requires energy, all right? So, and liquid, all right?
Hyponatremia.
Yeah, so you really want to be careful about, and this is, I don't want to scare anybody, this isn't something that happens a lot, but it has happened, especially, I think within the last month, somebody got, I think they even passed away, yeah, from hyponatremia. So they were overhydrated, all right? So you really want to be careful about how much you're throwing down to. That's a good point. If you're throwing down anywhere from half to one of these bottles per hour, you're probably going to be safe. But if you're, again, pay attention to your body. Practice your nutrition. So hyponatremia, you want to be careful about the electrolytes too, because electrolytes help make you retain water. All right. Practice. See what when you drink that goo or the noon. See how long it stays in your stomach. it'll stay in your system a little bit longer. And I know I can feel it because I'm really self-aware on what's going on in my body. But when you're taking those electrolytes, make sure not to take too much, and then drink water with it because your body's gonna hold on to all that water. All right, your body's gonna hold on to all that water.
Too much water can start to flush electrolytes out of your system too. So on a humid day, be aware of more possibly Gatorade or something like that.
And that's why I always like to recommend having sports drinks, because not only will you get some electrolyte, you'll get some sodium with it, but it's got a nice water to electrolyte balance too. So, all right, any other questions?